today's webinar with you all. A couple housekeeping items. So at the end of the webinar, we will have time for questions. In your GoToWebinar form there, you should see a box of questions. Feel free to type your questions in there, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. But with that, we're going to go ahead and kick off today's webinar. So Tony, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presenter role over to you, and you can get started.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Jill, and thanks to everybody for coming, attending today to learn more about the Enphase Energy System with our new IQ8 microinverter. Just give me a moment here to get situated here and share my screen. There we go. Can you see my screen okay, Jill?
Yeah, you're all set.
Okay, great. All right, so yeah, the focus of today's webinar is it's the Enphase Energy System as a whole, but we're going to talk a lot about what kind of is new about the Enphase system because of some of the unique features of the IQ8 microinverter. A little bit of background on myself. My name's Tony Vernetti. I've been with Enphase for just a little bit over 2 years. And before joining Enphase, I worked primarily for different solar installation companies all in California, doing mostly sales, but a little bit of tech support and training as well. So I've been in the business since about 2008, and I'm just ecstatic to be working with Enphase now and have the opportunity to share what I learned selling solar and batteries for many years with all of you out there. This might have been mentioned already, but there's a questions tool in GoToWebinar. It's great for you to type questions in using that tool throughout the session. That way I can kind of see those questions come in and prepare to answer them either in the moment or during the Q&A at the end. So since today's session technically is a training session, let's go over the learning objectives, essentially what we'd like to get out of today's session. So after this session, you should be able to do these following 5 things. Describe the key features of the Enphase Energy System and its benefits, and their benefits. Explain the benefit of having control of the entire system from a single application. Describe the unique benefits of the IQ8 microinverter. List the Enphase components which are required for the different configurations we're going to go over. And then lastly, explain how the IQ load controller can improve the homeowner experience. Let's start with the Enphase Energy System value proposition. With the Enphase Energy System, homeowners can have an all-in-one solar, battery, and software system engineered to work perfectly together, and the entire system is managed by a single app. Many other systems on the market are comprised of components from different manufacturers that aren't really designed to work together. They don't effectively communicate with each other. This approach usually results in limitations to the performance of the system, and it also often leads to a poor customer experience. The power produced by the solar system with Enphase microinverters can be stored in the battery for use anytime, whether it's for backup power during blackouts, during peak hours to reduce energy bills, or simply for self-consumption if the customer doesn't have a good net metering deal with their utility. Our load control feature can automatically manage large electrical loads, which improves the resilience of the system and the customer experience. The intuitive Enphase app, excuse me. The intuitive Enphase app allows the owner to easily monitor and control the entire system. They can see historical energy production by the solar array, the state of charge of their batteries, and they can easily customize the system settings for their individual preferences. Before I continue, I'd like to pause and review a few changes we've made to product names. If you've been using Enphase for a while, you're probably familiar with the older names, but we did kind of go through a wholesale name change. And the new names are actually much easier to remember because they essentially describe the item as opposed to being kind of unusual or unique names. Our battery storage system has been called both Ensemble and Enphase Storage in the past, but with the new advanced feature of sunlight backup with the IQ8, where just the microinverter can provide backup power, we've changed the name to the Enphase Energy System. So this new name encompasses all configurations with or without batteries. The N-Charge storage system or battery has been renamed the IQ battery. The N-Power, which is the smart switch or microgrid interconnect device of our system, has been renamed the IQ system controller. With the introduction of the IQ8, we have a new smart switch, which we simply named the IQ system controller 2. And the IQ Envoy, the key communication device of our system, has been renamed the IQ Gateway. So let's dive a little deeper into the IQ8. It is our smartest and most responsive microinverter yet. The key difference between the IQ8 and earlier generations is its ability to provide backup power to a home during a grid outage, even without a battery. Now, how is this possible? The IQ8 has an advanced microchip called an ASIC, which is designed specifically for its function as a grid-forming or grid-agnostic microinverter. It's about 1,000 times faster than the previous generation, which allows it to adjust extremely quickly to changes in the electrical demand of the home, and this ensures stability of the microgrid. Other inverter companies have attempted this in the past, but their solutions could only offer a very limited amount of power to a single outlet receptacle. So you would have homeowners running extension cords from their solar inverter all the way across their house to their refrigerator to try to keep it up and running. The IQ8 and the Enphase Energy System allows automatic and instant backup power for the home's essential loads with the full available power of the solar array. The fast response time also means that a relatively large solar system can be connected even to our smallest 3.3 kilowatt hour battery. And this large ratio of solar power to battery power won't impact the stability of the microgrid in a negative way. Naturally, you also have all the same benefits you're accustomed to with distributed architecture, such as higher energy yield, minimized impact of shade, and no single inverter as a single point of failure. To simplify the options available with the Enphase Energy System, we have these 4 configurations laid out in this table. The first is solar only. So this is a conventional grid-tied solar system designed to save the homeowner money, run the home on clean energy, and like all the systems, can be managed with the Enphase app. It's important to note that this first configuration here is not a backup power configuration. It is a conventional grid-tied system. The next column here is the truly innovative configuration that we call sunlight backup. This configuration can provide backup power to the home's essential loads if the sun is shining on the solar array. When offering this solution to homeowners, it's critically important to communicate not just the benefits, but also the limitations due to the natural variability of the power output. Next, we have the Home Essentials backup option, where we first integrate a battery, which now offers emergency backup power to the essential loads of a home 24 hours a day. Our battery sizes start at just 3.3 kilowatt hours. And again, now there's a lot more flexibility when sizing a large PV system with a relatively small battery. Lastly, we have the full energy independence configuration, which would be designed to provide backup power to all the loads of the home, otherwise known as whole home backup. The solar array and battery size can be customized with the help of Enphase's free system planner to meet the specific energy and power requirements of the home. So we're going to cover how each of these configurations works in more detail throughout this session. So first, again, is solar only. The IQ8 series can be installed and can function just like previous generations for a conventional grid-tied solar application when backup power isn't required. A grid-tied system will feed power to the home, reducing energy consumption from the utility. And whenever the system is producing more power than the home requires, that excess power is fed back to the utility. Most solar customers have agreements with their utility that earn them credit for this excess power called net metering. In summary, the solar-only configuration will save the homeowner money while powering their home with clean energy. Many new solar owners mistakenly believe that their new high-tech solar power plant on their roof will power their home during an outage. And they're often extremely disappointed when they find out that their conventional solar system will turn off automatically during an outage. The sunlight backup configuration is our solution. With the addition of the Enphase IQ system controller, the sunlight backup system can disconnect instantly from the grid during a power outage. And the solar system with the IQ8 microinverters will instantly form the microgrid and power the home. Since the sun is the power source, a sunlight backup system must be designed with the variability of sunshine and available power in mind. Therefore, for this configuration, we do require the installation of an essential loads panel so that during an outage, only the essential loads will be powered by the sunlight backup system, not the entire house. We also require the installation of an IQ load controller. This is a new, well, it's been around for several months, but it's a relatively new product from Enphase that allows the system to control the power supply to up to 4 120-volt circuits. Let's review a single line diagram which illustrates how the system works. When the utility grid fails, the IQ system controller disconnects instantly from the utility grid. If it's sunny, the microgrid is instantly formed by the IQ8 microinverters. That means that the essential loads panel will have continuous power from the microgrid. They're not going to have any downtime. However, the circuits in the main panel would no longer have power because they're outside the microgrid. If the power outage occurs at night, the IQ8s will wake up when sunshine hits the solar panels in the morning and form the microgrid. Here we have some recommended essential loads which should be connected to the IQ load controller. So the way the IQ load controller works is that these loads would receive power based on a pre-configured schedule. The reasoning there, which I'll touch on in more detail in subsequent slides, is to allow the system enough time to ramp up its potential power output so that when those loads begin to turn on, they don't collapse the microgrid. So here we have 4 typical loads for essential loads panel for sunlight backup. First would be internet equipment to make sure that we have the internet and the home networks equipment up and running so we can connect to the gateway and control the system and monitor it. The next load would ideally be the refrigerator, as this is a critical load for any homeowner. The third load would be lights and fans. And the fourth would be just a miscellaneous outlet to allow the homeowner to charge some devices like their phones, laptops, etc. So how does the sunlight backup system work in the real world? Let's take a look at an average size solar system with a 10 kilowatt DC rating and 8 kilowatt AC rating. The amount of available power from the system depends on irradiance, or the intensity of the sunshine. On a sunny day with clear skies, the available power at sunrise will be low. It'll gradually increase until midday when it peaks, and then gradually decline until the sun sets. If the power demand of the home's loads ever exceeds the available power of the solar array, the microgrid will become unstable and shut down, and the power will go out. This will obviously happen at the end of the day every day as the sun goes down, but it could happen anytime during the day. For example, if the electrical loads start up right when the microgrid is formed and the power of the sunlight backup system is low, the microgrid would likely shut down. This isn't ideal and it could be very worrisome for the homeowner. So this is why we require the installation of load control with every sunlight backup system. With the load control feature, the system can allow the electrical loads to start only after the sun has been up for a while, and there's enough irradiance and available power to successfully start and run those loads. In this example, you can see that the power surge of a typical refrigerator would be too high soon after sunrise. However, if that load was scheduled to start later, such as 9 a.m., there would be abundant power available at that moment to start the fridge and keep the microgrid up successfully. So here's what a typical day would look like. Soon after sunrise, the IQ8s would form the microgrid and start converting power. The load control feature will allow loads to turn on according to a pre-configured schedule. This allows irradiance and therefore the potential power to increase and improve the chance that the system will successfully power the loads. Then, in order to prevent the homeowner from experiencing the same kind of intermittent power as irradiance decreases, the controlled loads will be turned off in the late afternoon. The default schedule powers on loads at 9 a.m. and powers them off at 4 p.m. Since the times of sunrise and sunset vary both seasonally and with latitude, the window during which the controlled loads have power can be adjusted by the installer at the time of installation to be any time between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. As the amount of power early in the morning is going to be naturally lower, we recommend scheduling smaller loads to start earlier in the day. And if you're attempting to power any larger loads, we recommend starting those later in the day to allow time for irradiance to increase. A notable difference between a sunlight backup system and one that has batteries is that it doesn't have the same ability to provide an extra burst of power, which we call peak power with batteries, which can be helpful in starting appliances that have a starting surge like air conditioners and pumps. If a typical whole home air conditioner were to turn on, the large demand spike would most likely cause an instant collapse of a sunlight backup microgrid. While it's possible that a large solar system with a really attentive homeowner who's paying attention to cloud cover and understands how much power their appliances demand, they could potentially operate a large appliance with a sunlight backup system successfully. However, let's be real, most homeowners are not watching their system or the clouds like a hawk, and for them to have a kind of consistent, good quality experience with their system, it would be best to only back up relatively small loads like the loads that I mentioned earlier. For an optimal customer experience, Enphase recommends that the total power of the essential loads should be no more than about 30% of the rated AC power of the system. So in this example, with an 8 kilowatt AC system, the total load should be no more than about 2.4 kilowatts. Now, what about clouds? On a partly cloudy day, the available solar power will fluctuate as clouds periodically block the sun. As with any scenario, the home's power demand must stay below the available power of the solar array, otherwise the microgrid will get overloaded and shut down. So when you're discussing sunlight backup systems with homeowners, potential customers, it's important to explain how this system may operate given their emergency power requirements, as well as the climate where they live. A sunlight backup system will operate a lot more reliably in Southern California that has a high percentage of clear sunny days compared to the Pacific Northwest, which has more overcast, generally more cloud cover in general. So what happens if the system does shut down unexpectedly due to being overloaded? Well, it's going to automatically restart, fortunately. So the homeowner doesn't have to go to the equipment and flip any switches. They don't have to open up the app. It's automatically going to restart in about 1 to 2 minutes, at which time the first controlled load, which should be the internet modem, will get powered up. Then after a gap of about 22 seconds, the second circuit will power up. After a gap of another 22 seconds, the third circuit will go power up. And then lastly, one more gap and the last circuit will power up. If there is a load on any one of these circuits that causes a shutdown 5 times in a row, it's going to be excluded from the startup sequence on the 6th try. This way, at least the remaining loads on the remaining 3 circuits will have power. The owner can actually go then into the app and manually turn that load on with the app. And if that load stays on for 5 minutes, then that shutdown counter is going to reset to 0. Now, it's important to note that this level of control, being able to control 4 loads independently, would require 2 IQ load controllers. It's a common misconception that inverters are delivering their full rated power whenever the sun shines, but this isn't the case. The power output of a solar inverter is relative to irradiance, again, or the intensity of sunshine. Irradiance is naturally lower in the winter than the summer. A solar inverter system with a rated power of 8 kilowatts may only reach around 5 to 6 kilowatts in the winter. Winter days are also shorter than summer, so the window during which the solar system could potentially power the home is going to be smaller. The next configuration is the Home Essentials Backup, which includes one or more IQ batteries. This configuration extends backup power from daytime only to 24 hours a day. For those homeowners that require reliable backup power around the clock, batteries are a must-have. Battery options start at just 3.3 kilowatt hours, but a typical system will have around 10 to 20 kilowatt hours for an optimal homeowner experience. An Essential Loads panel and IQ load controller are still highly recommended to limit the number of loads backed up by a relatively small battery. And with load control, again, you have the ability to shed large loads, which could potentially overload the battery or maybe just drain it too quickly. Now that we're introducing a battery into the configuration, let's review one of the key benefits of the new IQ8. Since the IQ8 can respond extremely quickly to changes in power demand, and this helps keep the microgrid stable, the strict 1.5 to 1 ratio of solar AC power to battery AC power no longer applies with the IQ8. That means a large PV system can even be paired with a single IQ battery 3. The option to add a small battery to a large solar system is pretty unique. Typically, manufacturers limit the power of the solar system to be about 50% higher than the battery to ensure that the solar system itself doesn't cause a collapse of the microgrid by attempting to feed more power into that battery than it can handle. In other words, if a customer had a big solar system, then they would have to get a big battery to match it. Homeowners sometimes feel like they're forced into buying a much larger battery than they really need. With Enphase, the homeowner gets to choose the battery size based on their backup power needs, and it's not influenced by the size of the solar system. Even if the homeowner chooses a single IQ battery 3, they'll now have backup power for their essential items 24 hours a day. And during sunlight hours, the solar system's power adds to the battery, allowing the owner to potentially run some higher power devices for a limited period during the day. Our last configuration is full energy independence. So if reliable and robust backup power for the entire home is needed, then this is the configuration to select. The solar and battery system will be sized to meet 100% of a home's electricity needs with up to 4 IQ battery 10s for a total of 40 kilowatt hours of energy capacity. So I'm going to pause here and do a quick learning check, just sort of make sure everyone's still paying attention and see if there are any questions about anything I've covered so far. So the first question here is true or false? Enphase recommends a maximum power ratio of 1.5 to 1 solar AC power to battery AC power when using the IQ8 microinverter. The answer is false. That 1.5 to 1 ratio that I refer to applies to earlier generations of our microinverters. It does not apply to the IQ8. With a sunlight backup configuration, what happens when the power demand exceeds the available solar system power? The microgrid will become unstable and shut down, and the power will go out for that homeowner. True or false? When disconnected from the utility, the amount of available power of an Enphase sunlight backup system is consistent during daylight hours. The answer is false. The amount of available power varies with irradiance. So let's, Jill, I don't have the ability to see questions, I guess, as a panelist. So if there are any questions that people have typed in and you'd like to, tell me what those are, I can try to answer them now, or we can just wait till the end to do a Q&A for all questions that came in.
It's fully up to you, Tony. There are a little bit, there's kind of a handful of questions right now that we can go and answer, or if you want to wait till the end, fully up to you.
Okay. I'm guessing it's going to be easier just to do it at the end rather than interrupt the flow right now. So let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, so the next short section here is about sizing storage. There we go. Okay, so why is sizing an energy storage system properly so important? Well, when sizing, we're trying to accomplish 3 goals. First, proper sizing ensures that the system has enough energy storage capacity to power the home for the necessary period of time, whether that's just a few hours for short power outages or for 12 or 16 hours if multiple day power outages are expected. Next, it ensures that the system will have enough power to run the home's loads continuously. And lastly, it's to ensure that the system has a high enough peak power to be able to start up appliances that have a high inrush current, namely air conditioning and pumps. If your system design achieves all three of these, you're going to have a lot of happy customers and hopefully very few service calls. The terms power and energy are often used interchangeably incorrectly, but when sizing energy storage, it's critical to understand the difference. Energy has many familiar names that we've learned probably from high school chemistry, like BTU, joule, and calorie. But when talking about electrical energy, the unit that we use is the watt hour, or more commonly, 1,000 of these, which is a kilowatt hour, kWh. Batteries and energy storage systems have their energy storage capacity stated in kilowatt hours. For example, the Enphase IQ Battery 10 has a capacity of 10 kilowatt hours. Energy capacity is analogous to the capacity of a fuel tank. A 10-gallon tank can hold more fuel or energy than a 5-gallon tank. So if energy is like fuel capacity, what is power exactly? Well, power is the rate or speed of either energy consumption or production. Otherwise, you could also say it's the speed at which energy is moving from one place to another. A large appliance like an air conditioner uses a lot of power. You could say it consumes energy at a very fast rate. A device like a television uses a small amount of power, so it consumes energy at a slow rate. Now that we've defined energy and power, let's look at how they're related and how to determine how much energy something's going to use. Energy equals power over a period of time. That's why the term for energy has the time component in it, the H in the watt hour. If you have an appliance with an operating power of 1,000 watts and it runs continuously in hours, it would consume 10,000 watt hours, since 1,000 watts times 10 hours is 10,000. A battery powering this load must have a continuous power output of at least 1,000 watts to successfully, again, power that load and keep that microgrid stable. All appliances and devices have an operating power. That's just how much power is needed to keep them running continuously. But some types of appliances have a surge of power demand for a second or two when they first start up. Starting surge can be really significant with motor-driven appliances like pumps, air conditioners, even large refrigerators can be an issue. In this example, this pump, which would be typical for a jacuzzi or a small pool, has an operating power of about 1,000 watts. But when it first starts up for about a second, it requires almost 6 times that, about 6,000 watts. If you're trying to explain this to a homeowner, the best analogy that I've come across is the extra effort that's needed to get a shopping cart going. It takes a big push of energy, or power, I should say, to get the terms right. A lot of power to get it going, but then once it's rolling, it takes a lot less power to keep it moving. Same applies to something like a pool pump or air conditioner. It's critically important to set realistic expectations with your customers when it comes to battery performance to ensure they have a positive experience, know what to expect. Both energy and power increase with larger IQ battery systems. 2 IQ Battery 10s will have double the energy capacity, double the power, and double the peak power compared to 1. While the Enphase IQ batteries start at just 3.3 kilowatt hours, this is a pretty small battery for most homeowners. If the homeowner wants this small battery, you should be clear that they should limit the number of loads they're trying to power and probably also use Enphase load control in order to shed loads that could potentially overload a small battery. 1 IQ Battery 10 is a good starting point for most partial home backup scenarios. An IQ Battery 10 can power a standard fridge, small kitchen appliances like coffee makers, water, boiling kettles, pretty much anything that plugs into a standard 120 volt outlet, and it can run multiple devices simultaneously. A lot of people will start with an IQ Battery 10 and see how things go, and then they can add additional IQ Battery 3s or 10s in the future if their needs change or if the size was underestimated perhaps. For whole home backup, or if any large electrical appliances require backup power, at least 2 IQ Battery 10s should be installed. A large electrical appliance is one that connects to a 30 to 50 amp double pole circuit breaker. Typical examples, again, are air conditioners, pumps, most electric kitchen appliances also, like electric ranges, electric ovens, electric water heaters, etc. If more than one large electrical appliance must operate concurrently, then 3 or 4 IQ Battery 10s should be installed. We recommend using the Enphase System Planner. This is a free application available on our website when sizing a battery system to ensure it's going to perform as expected. A little bit more detail about the Enphase System Planner. With this tool, you can accurately size a battery storage system to meet the specific energy and power needs of the homeowner. You can adjust the quantities of different appliances and their specific electrical characteristics, like their power, surge current, and number of hours they need to operate. The System Planner recommends a battery size, and it also tells you which factor or factors is behind the minimum size recommendation, because it could be either energy, power, or surge power. Using this tool with a homeowner should give them that added confidence that you're going the extra mile to ensure that the system's going to work properly and isn't going to get overloaded or maybe drained of energy too quickly. You can also generate a PDF report, which includes all the details from this exercise that you did, such as the recommended size, all the electrical loads, and bill of materials as well. Let's do another quick learning check here. What is the term that we use for electrical energy? Or unit, I guess would be the right term to use. That's going to be the watt hour or kilowatt hour. The energy capacity of a battery determines which of the following: what it can start, what it can run continuously, or how long it will last. So energy is related to how long the battery is going to last. Name an appliance with a high starting surge. Air conditioners and pumps are the two most common that we see. And lastly, what's the minimum recommended IQ Battery 10 quantity or kilowatt hour capacity for whole home backup? That would be 2 IQ Battery 10s. Now let's review the key components of the Enphase Energy System and their roles. There are 6 key components: IQ8 microinverters with a solar array, IQ Combiner 4 or 4C, IQ System Controller 2, System Shutdown Switch, IQ Batteries, and IQ Load Controller. The IQ8 is available in 5 different models covering a wide range of power. The IQ8 and IQ8 Plus, sorry, jumped ahead there. The IQ8 and 8 Plus have very similar power ratings to their IQ7 counterparts, the same number at a maximum in each branch circuit. So it's going to be easy to change plans from the IQ7 to the IQ8 if that's desired. We then have the IQ8M, IQ8A, and IQ8H with progressively higher power ratings. The IQ8H is our most powerful model with a power rating of 384 VA. It can be paired with modules up to around 530 watts with little to no losses to inverter saturation. Let's talk about more about the IQ battery. So this is, again, our battery storage system, which comes in 2 energy capacities, as well as an alternative form factor. The IQ Battery 3 has an energy storage capacity of 3.3 kilowatt hours, and the IQ Battery 10 can handle 10 kilowatt hours. The Enphase Energy System is an AC coupled battery system. That means that there's DC to AC conversion both at the solar array and in the battery. The benefits are that the power of both the battery and the PV system are additive, meaning that during the day, the system has the combined power of both. This can be helpful when running larger electrical loads, for example, like running electric dryer during the daytime, which would be too much for the batteries to handle at night. Another benefit is that it's easier to integrate other AC power sources, such as an existing AC backup generator, or in the future, potentially connecting electric vehicles to be a source of power for the home. Each IQ battery has multiple integrated IQ8 microinverters. This provides redundancy and improves the reliability of the system compared to other systems that just have a single inverter. The battery chemistry of the IQ battery is lithium iron phosphate, abbreviated LFP. It's a considerably safer and more stable lithium-based chemistry than our competitors use, which is normally NMC, or nickel manganese cobalt. LFP batteries are not only safer, but they also retain their energy capacity better than the other common chemistries over time with heavy use. Since LFP battery chemistry is inherently safer, IQ battery units have a simple passive cooling system. By that I mean no moving parts. For example, no pumps, no fans, no liquid coolant like some of our competitors do. By removing these moving parts, we're removing potential single points of failure from the system. The microinverters in the batteries are also field serviceable. That just means that if one fails, a technician can come out with a new one and replace it on site in a matter of minutes. Other batteries, the inverter is basically incorporated in the battery in such a way that it's not field serviceable. So the entire 300 or 400 pound unit would have to be exchanged. Our warranty is for either 10 years or 4,000 full cycles, whichever comes first. And we guarantee that even after 4,000 cycles, which would take almost 11 years if you cycled it completely every day, is still going to hold at least 70% of its original capacity. So here I put the kind of the original IQ batteries and the newer version, which is the 3T and 10T, next to each other, so you can kind of see physically what the differences are. As you can see, the T models are thinner than the standard IQ batteries, but they are also wider. The T series might be more desirable in small garages where space is a concern, or potentially on exterior wall installations and walkways. They're also a little bit lighter. They can be installed with the original IQ batteries in the same system. However, since they do have a slightly different appearance, it would be probably best to use the same model if you're adding batteries or doing multiple batteries on a single system. Otherwise, they're very much the same power and energy capacities, same multiple IQ8 microinverters, same warranty and price. Kind of duplicated that slide. Okay, so let's talk now about the IQ system controller. It is essentially the hub of the system to which all power sources and electrical loads connect. Its primary function is to instantly disconnect the home from the utility grid if there's a grid outage. Therefore, it's a required component for any backup power configuration, even sunlight backup without batteries. The IQ System Controller 2, specifically the 2, must be used when installing IQ8 microinverters on the solar array, since it's compatible with the Enphase system shutdown switch. This switch must be installed with IQ8s on the solar array in order to comply with rapid shutdown requirements. The IQ System Controller 2 is also compatible with earlier generations like IQ7s and earlier. However, the original IQ System Controller is still available and distributors still have some of those. So if you're installing IQ7s or earlier, we still recommend using the original IQ System Controller. As I mentioned, permanent standby generators can be integrated with the IQ System Controller 2, and I've got a couple slides which go into that in more detail a little bit later. The enclosure rating is NEMA 3R. That means it can be installed either inside or outside. I think I failed to mention that about the batteries as well. They're also NEMA 3R. So the batteries and the system controller can be installed outside. And up to 4 IQ batteries, to be specific, 4 IQ battery 10s for a total of 40 kilowatt hours can be connected to an IQ system controller too. Now let's talk about the IQ Combiner 4. It houses the breakers for the solar system branch circuits. Up to 4 20 amp circuit breakers can be installed, so up to 64 amps of continuous current from the microinverters. The number of IQ8s that you can install depends on which specific model of IQ8 you're using. The Combiner 4 or 4C must be used with any IQ8 solar system in a backup power configuration. And it can also be used with earlier models like IQ7. It also houses the IQ gateway, which sends information to the cloud for monitoring and control of the system. We recommend connecting the IQ gateway to broadband internet service for a good quality customer experience. It can be connected either via Wi-Fi or via an Ethernet cable to the home's network. A communications kit must also be installed in the combiner for backup power configurations. It enables wireless communication between the components in the backup system. And lastly, we also require the installation of an Enphase cell modem. It serves as a backup internet connection in case the home's network loses power during an outage. In the IQ Combiner 4C, the C at the end refers to the cell modem. So this, again, the IQ Combiner 4C has the cell modem pre-installed. And that cell modem is a Sprint and T-Mobile, or I should say Sprint and T-Mobile, since there was that acquisition, cell modem. If you know that Sprint T-Mobile service is no good at that location, you do have an option to get an AT&T cell modem as well. If that's the case, you would simply buy the standard IQ Combiner 4 that doesn't include the modem, and then purchase the AT&T compatible modem separately from Enphase, or from your distributor. Or you guys, yeah, from you guys. Okay, lastly, I want to go into the IQ load controller and generator support, and then we'll open up to the Q&A. So the IQ load controller is a kit which makes it possible to control multiple loads in an Enphase Energy System. With load control, a homeowner can make sure that specific large loads, which could either potentially overload the microgrid or drain the battery quickly, will get turned off immediately when the utility grid fails and the Enphase microgrid is powering the home. Then the homeowner can go into the Enphase app and restore power manually if they wish. The behavior can also be customized for each load. For example, a load can be set to turn on or off depending on the battery's state of charge. This would prevent large loads from completely draining the battery quickly. Loads can also be set to only have power if there's an integrated generator that's parallel. As I mentioned earlier, but I'm going to harp on it a couple more times, Enphase requires the use of load control for the sunlight backup configuration. And that's because the amount of power available can be very low at times of the day. So we want to be able to control the power to all the loads if it's a sunlight backup configuration. Getting a little bit into the details here, but each IQ load controller can control power to 2 zones. Now, what do I mean by a zone? A zone can be either one 240 volt circuit or two 120 volt circuits. Two IQ load controllers can be installed per system. So that would be a total of 4 zones. Lastly, an IQ load controller can also be used for solar circuit shedding. So this would apply if you're using IQ7 or earlier models on the solar array, and you need to comply with our 1.5 to 1 maximum ratio of solar AC power to battery AC power. So what you'd basically do is use the load controller to disconnect a branch circuit of the solar array if needed in order to comply or to maintain that 1.5 to 1 ratio. So let's talk about compatibility. The Enphase Energy System, to be more specific, an IQ battery can be installed with any of these models the IQ8, IQ7, IQ6, M215, and M250. IQ batteries are not compatible with the models below, the S280, S230, or M190. So if you're working with a customer that has an older Enphase system with one of the models listed down below, and they wanted backup power, they would have to upgrade their microinverters to one of the models above. It's also important to note that solar microinverters within an Enphase microgrid can't be mixed between these different families shown here. In other words, all microinverters on the solar array must be from one of these families. They can't be mixed together from multiple families. For example, if the customer has a IQ, let's say 12 IQ7s on their solar array, and they want to add another 12 solar panels and a battery, they would have to either replace those IQ7s with IQ8s and add more IQ8s, or they could just keep their IQ7s on their solar array, add more IQ7s to the solar array, and then add the battery. My opinion is that it's more cost effective to, rather than spending money to replace an IQ7 with an IQ8, take that money and buy a battery instead to get a higher quality backup power experience for the homeowner. One more learning check here. True or false? IQ8 solar microinverters can be added to an existing IQ7 system for a sunlight backup configuration. False. All solar microinverters in a Enphase microgrid must be from one family, and the IQ7 and IQ8 are not from the same family. Which system components are required in addition to the IQ8 for sunlight backup configurations? That would be an IQ System Controller 2, System Shutdown Switch, IQ Combiner 4 or 4C, an IQ Load Controller. Here it says 2, but only 1 is required now, and an Essential Loads panel. True or false? The highest peak power of the IQ8 series is the same as the IQ7 series. False. The IQ8H has a higher power rating than any of the IQ7s at 384 VA. What's the primary job of the Enphase IQ Gateway? It is monitoring and control. Now, I want to talk about a unique feature to Enphase, which is called Sunlight Jumpstart. This applies only with the IQ8 microinverters on the solar array, and it improves the resilience of the system, especially during prolonged power outages. Typical AC-coupled battery systems rely on the battery to initiate backup power to the home. And problems can arise if a battery gets fully depleted overnight, because the next morning it may not have enough power to initiate the microgrid and allow the solar panels and inverter to wake up and start producing power, even if it's sunny. Sunlight Jumpstart means that the Enphase micros on the solar array can power the home even with a completely depleted battery. Then once the microgrid is up and running and the home's receiving power from solar, the excess generation can go toward recharging that battery. So if you're talking to new customers, but they're not quite ready for battery storage, you might be wondering, should I use the IQ8s or IQ7s? Well, the benefit of using IQ8s is that you're kind of future-proofing the system. If battery storage is added later, the system is just going to perform better. It's going to be more resilient than with using IQ7s because of the advantage of Sunlight Jumpstart. Now, just a couple slides here, actually one slide about generator integration, then we'll open it up to the Q&A. So what's special about Enphase's approach to generator integration is that it eliminates the external transfer switch. There's no transfer switch with our system. The generator is actually tied directly into the IQ system controller. During a grid outage, the generator, battery, and solar can all operate simultaneously. With all three power sources operating together during a grid outage, the home will have the combined power to start and run large electrical loads. For example, a homeowner could run their AC or electric dryer just during the day when all three power sources are operating, and then conserve energy at nighttime when running only off the battery. The generator can even be used to charge the batteries if needed. This can be helpful if there's very little sunshine on a given day because of storm clouds or maybe wildfire smoke. It's important to note that if a generator is integrated with an older Enphase system with M215 or M250 microinverters, the solar system actually can't operate together with a generator. But with IQ series, the generator can operate simultaneously. So for those of you who are going to be installing IQ8s or already installing IQ8s, it's important to note that you have to have an additional certification from Enphase in order to use the software to commission a system. I'm going to share this PDF deck with Jill so she can share it with all of you that will have these instructions to follow if you need to. Essentially, you have to take the standard Enphase storage installation training and an IQ8 training course. Because as we reviewed today, there are some additional components like the Enphase system shutdown switch and some other installation details which are important when installing IQ8s that didn't apply to earlier models. Wanted to draw attention to the available training opportunities at Enphase. So we have additional webinars available at enphase.com/events. We do live webinars, of course, like today. We provide a lot of on-demand webinars for a number of different topics. And if you want to get certified at Enphase University, we have certification available in these three categories of sales, installation, and design. And for those of you who are involved in marketing for your company, I encourage you to check out the Enphase brand library. Here you can download sales sheets, presentations, comparison documents, high resolution photos, and a number of other great resources to kind of spruce up perhaps your website or other marketing materials you're working on. If you want to demo the Enphase app to a homeowner, you don't actually have to have a login ID to do that. Simply install the Enphase app and then tap on Experience the app before you log in, and it will open up a demo version. All right, with that, we'll open it up to the Q&A. Jill, again, I can't see the questions, so if you would like to share those with me, or maybe the ones that you think would be the most important to cover today, would be great.
Yeah. So what we can do to keep it easy here, I'll go ahead and read some questions off to you, Tony, and then feel free to answer them. We do have quite a bit of questions. So if your question isn't answered in today's webinar, I will be following up with everyone. This webinar was recorded, so I'll include a link to watch the recording and then also share contact information for how to have your question answered. So apologize, we only have a few minutes here. So first question we have, Tony, does the window for sunlight EU start-stop time automatically adjust for daylight saving?
So no, it doesn't currently automatically adjust at all. The window can be adjusted by the homeowner or the installer. So yeah, when daylight savings time changes, or I should say goes into effect, you would certainly want to either send a notice out to your customers that have the systems to remind them to change those settings, or perhaps proactively do that for them.
Okay, awesome. Next question we have, can the IQ system controller and IQ battery be AC coupled to other PV inverters?
So currently, no. That's likely going to change in time, but today the Enphase IQ battery system and controller can only be connected to an Enphase brand PV system, or inverter system, that is.
Okay, thank you. Next question. So we have a viewer wondering if Enphase can work new 2022 F-150 Lightning has battery backup.
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. We did acquire Clipper Creek, which is an electric vehicle charging equipment company, at the end of last year, and one of our really high priorities for that division of the company is to really work hard at making electric, EV to grid or EV to home compatibility working for everybody. So, we are aware that the F-150 Lightning is now available and is designed to be able to do that. I just don't know any details about how we might integrate specifically with that one, but just know that we are working on it. And as soon as that's available, I'm sure that we're going to be plastering the internet with notifications. We're doing additional sales training webinars on that topic.
Awesome. I know the AE team will be looking forward to that webinar too.
Good.
Next question, what are the thermal limitations of IQ8 on the roof with full exposure south?
I don't know the details off the top of my head, but for the IQ8 microinverters on the roof, it's very wide range. I mean, our inverters are installed in the hottest and the coldest climates on the planet. We're installed in over 30 countries around the world. So I don't think that you would ever run into a situation where it would be too hot. I mean, even in the hottest climates in the US, like Phoenix, Arizona, Mojave Desert, California, we have systems working just fine in those climates. In the warranty, the temperature range in the warranty is very wide. And I can share the data sheet with Jill, which she can share with you, that goes into more detail on that.
Perfect. So I think this will probably be our last question here, but can the IQ8 be connected to an existing off-grid electrical system not using IQ10 batteries?
So, sometimes the term off-grid is used to refer to systems that have zero connection to the utility grid, like a remote cabin in the woods. In those instances, I don't believe that we support the installation of IQ8s. I can't provide a great answer to that question. So in a truly off-grid scenario, I don't think that we support it. If you're talking about potentially integrating with other battery systems that are grid tied, whether it's a Powerwall or some other kind of AC coupled system that's designed to work with other microinverters, then yes, the IQ series, including the IQ8s, can be installed with other brands of AC coupled systems.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So just being conscious of time today, that does conclude our webinar. And as I stated earlier, I will be following up with everyone that attended today's webinar with a link to the recording and then some other resources from Tony to also hopefully help answer questions. Feel free to reach out to us if you didn't have your question answered. But thank you all for attending. We appreciate your time and look forward to the next webinar that we host. Thank you too, Tony.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Jill, and thanks for everyone for joining today. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.